Today in Tech AI Solution podcast, we have a guest who has a more than 30 years of experience in the lean manufacturing. Actually, he's the first one who trained Toyota's first North American plant, and then he handles Ford's projects. Now, let's talk to John. Welcome, John, to the podcast. Tell us about you and yourself.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, okay. So, what do your company do, and what's your role, and tell us about your journey, first of all.
Yeah. So, let me go back. I was working in Silicon Valley in California for a high-tech company, and I really wanted to move back to where my parents were living to be closer to them. They were getting older, and I found somebody at Toyota who was interested in hiring me, and I couldn't understand how he found me in California, but as it turns out, the state emphasized hiring Kentuckians, and so he found me out there. I had a set of skills that they were looking for, and they hired me to manage training and development. But anytime you're in Toyota, you'll do job rotations about every 2 or 3 years, and so I had several jobs along the way. But certainly an experience that absolutely shaped how I do my work, who I am, all those things, just because of the way that the Japanese looked at the workplace and the things that they did and how they went about doing it. So it was an interesting journey for me, continues to be as I try to learn. And certainly when it comes to AI, the potential for this is unbelievable. We all know that. In fact, we don't even it's so much we can't even comprehend it. But the message that I want to deliver today is that if people don't prepare for it, there's most likely going to be some unintended consequences that they're going to experience. And so as we go through this and talk about them, I want them to keep in mind that the best thing that can be done about AI right now is prepare for it. And I'll talk about how you should go about doing that.
Definitely, John. We will talk about AI and its implementation in this industry a lot. So first of all, if somebody is unfamiliar with the word lean, how do you describe that one in a plain English?
Yeah, so there's a story behind that. And when the folks at MIT wrote the book about the machine that changed the world, they were sitting there in a room one night saying, "What do we call this?" And somebody said, "Well, it's eliminating the fat." And then another person said, "Well, yeah, we're trying to get leaner." And somebody said, "That's it." Now, unfortunately, it has some unfortunate consequences because early on, when people heard, they only thought that lean was about getting rid of people, and it's anything but that. So we have a fair amount, just like they do in AI right now, a fair amount to get people to the point where they can make it happen. So it's been an interest of mine. I've studied it deeply. I went to Japan to learn about the culture. It's been and continues to be a great source of me trying to learn how organizations should function.
And how do you what do your company do for the clients? Just explain.
So the process is that I am very skeptical of somebody who comes into an organization, and I've had it happen to me, and they say, "I've got the answer for you." Okay. What lean is really about is teaching people how to think. And so what we do is we go in and help them describe the current situation in terms that are significant to organizations because it tells them where their weaknesses are and how they might go about doing that. And to take that assessment and use it and look at it at a strategic and a tactical level. And what we've learned through the years is that there are various phases you go through when you put in the production system. So what we're making them aware of is that it is indeed not a copy and paste solution. It's a solution that says that what we're really there to do is to teach you how to think. And so once they have the information, then how do we organize it? How do we go about getting it implemented? How do we most importantly get the entire organization engaged in what we're doing and to define roles in such a way so that the organization is more focused on success, not finding problems or not finding fault, let's say.
Okay.
So we have a systematic way to go about doing that.
So if I am a manufacturing company and I want to reach total system development, and what do you do is actually go through my all processes and let us know how we can improve this one and how we can improve the revenue. This is right way to say?
Yes, and that's a good description. However, what is significant about it is that with the experience that we have, what we've learned to do is to speak to the listening, if you will. Every company is a little differently. They look at the world a little differently. There is no rubber stamp, all size fits on kind of solution. here. So what we have to do is to make sure that those people who are leading the organization understand the significance, the value, and the role they play in making that happen. And with that, and gaining their trust and their respect, then we can begin to look at very difficult problems, but with simple solutions. But even more importantly, we can look at how to not just have leaders the only ones that are thinking about it, but have everybody in the corporation thinking about how they can get better every day. So,
That's right.
so it's a process of not telling, it's
Mhm.
a process of listening and teaching people how to think in systematic critical thinking ways. And that those skills become so important, but it's the least understood anywhere we've gone.
Perfect.
And the reason is simple is because most leaders believe that they're put into into the position they're in because of things they've accomplished in the past. So they work very hard to make sure that things don't happen that they don't,
Yeah.
that's not in their brain already. So we have quite a job in front of us to get people to stop and look at the situation. But even more importantly, to get everybody engaged in the process of critical thinking, problem solving. And so it was so important, a piece of the culture, that the people who actually make the product have the strongest skills in terms of problem solving. In
Yeah.
fact, we went to the point to tell the engineers that
Mhm.
if they walked out in the plant and they gave somebody a solution, we were going to fire them. What we are going to do, what we want them to do is to walk out there and teach people how to think critically.
Yeah.
And of course, when you hire people that have not been in that environment, there's a rather significant change that has to take place. And so we have to really look very deeply at the culture of the company and how it can be a culture of success and
Mhm.
how it can be a culture of listening and how it can be a culture of teaching and supporting whatever kinds of changes we want. So as you might imagine, that's difficult to do because again, I want to say most leaders believe that they're in the position they're in for the things that they have done, not the things they have taught other people to do. And so we have to go back and sort of start at the beginning and say, look, this is the kind of culture that we want to achieve. And here's why we want to do it. And oh, by the way, there's a pretty good model out there that's called Toyota that does it very well. And you look at Toyota from any perspective you want to, it is a very successful corporation. So
Mhm.
we're trying to not imitate Toyota because they would laugh at you for doing that, but to teach people how Toyota think about various problems and
Yeah.
how that thinking can get into the culture and how the culture then can support continuous improvement. And and the one other piece about that is that every plant in Toyota has a mother plant. And what we did in Toyota and what they continue today to do is to take the very best practices of the mother
Mhm.
plant and start the new plant with those practices. And of course,
Yeah.
the mother plant is continuing to improve and they're going on, but we've got to get to the point where we at least can do as well as they did when we started.
Okay.
So we have to go through a whole period of stability, and that
Mhm.
is to reduce the variability in the process, to reduce the things that hinder problem solving, and enhance the mutual trust and respect between the people who are running the organization and those people who are actually creating value and doing that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think the work that you're doing is completely reflecting from your philosophy. When I was researching about you, and you mentioned somewhere that we just don't not hand over 200 pages as a solution. We just drive them through step by step for each improvement. And that's the best thing a company can expect from their consultancy,
Well,
right?
that's right, because the ultimate result from any improvement is stabilization and repeatability and predictability and
Yeah.
reliability. So you have to be careful not to put in what we call isolated efficiency,
Mhm.
which is something that improves one part of the company but does nothing for the customer as a whole.
Okay. So now let's move your conversation towards the biggest change. So what do you think like biggest shift happening right now in this industry that a lot of the business leaders and I would
Yeah.
say consulting firms are still completely underestimating, and that from your conversation that's completely an AI, right?
Yes. It has I mean, AI has so much to do with it right now, obviously, because it's the conversation, but also from the fact that there are all kinds of people out there who will tell you they know and understand AI and they want to implement this solution in your organization. And what we're telling people is that they have to prepare the organization for that. It's no judgment about whether the solution is good or bad. It's not as good as it will be in the future, that's for sure. But
Mhm.
what they have to be careful about is taking somebody else's solution and changing their culture to accommodate it versus the other way around, which is to think deeply about what they're doing and say, okay, how can AI help us?
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example of how we did it at Toyota. It was a simple example, but you'll understand immediately. Every Toyota vehicle at some point in time goes into a shop and is either fixed or checked. Okay, that information, which is how the vehicle is performing for the customer, is vital to the plant. And if the plant knows and understands it, it can be on the road to continuous improvement to make the not just the process, but the product better. So
Mhm.
every time a vehicle comes into the dealer collects the information where the problem is and what part of the car. That's translated into what in the standard work either doesn't work or was violated as the vehicle went through the process, and how can we ensure that that doesn't happen again, so that it's not just a process of looking internal to yourself. Now you have the perspective of the customer on the process, not just on the vehicle, but on the process. And as these changes come through and as you work them as a problem, a deviation, if you will, then the deviations and the solution to them have to be put into the standard work so that the individual, what's nice about it is any deviation they find at a dealer can be traced back to a standard process in the plant that
Mhm.
somehow either didn't work or was not followed. So it gives you an opportunity from a positive standpoint, which is that mistakes are going to be made. We're human. It's going to happen. So
Yeah.
we got two choices. We can either blame people or we can support them in the change, to make it even better. And Toyota's philosophy very much comes down on whatever information, no problems are bad. They're never bad. They're good.
Yeah.
In fact, it's the way we get better. And so, you know, the accumulation of that information, the putting it into something usable at the plant, getting that information to the plant, getting it to the process, all of those things require a certain acceptance. And the acceptance is that that information is really valuable to us, right? We're going to treat it like gold, right? Because it helps us get better. Too many times in organizations, and you've found this too, that they're
Yeah.
better at the Toyota folks used to tease us and say Americans are really great at excuses, but they're not very good at solving problems. So we had to learn how to solve problems. Well, you're not going to solve a problem if you're constantly getting blamed.
Yeah.
You're not going to solve a problem if you're not treated with respect. You're not going to solve a problem if you're not taught how to solve problems. And so that little bit of information is just some insight into how massive amounts of information can be reduced to something that identifies a problem at the plant and then how it happens in the plant. If you haven't created the culture for that to happen,
Mhm.
then you're going to be a typical American plant. You're going to find excuses for everything, and that's death. That just means that you may have periods of time when you get better, but the trend line is going to be negative.
Definitely, definitely. I think John Lean was born in manufacturing, and your TSD development, like this environment, works in every aspects of this one, manufacturing floors, hospitals, everything. Do you think that AI make it more relevant or less relevant? And are the companies using AI as a shortcut that is actually creating waste rather than eliminating it? Do you believe that?
Well, what I believe, I like to think in systems, okay?
Mhm.
And whether you go to one side or the other, the test is, are you making the system better? Are you making improvements? Are you making the lives of the people in the plant better? And
Yes.
so
Hmm.
those distinctions are important for us to understand how we can make the system better. And the
Hmm.
system is based on information from all kinds of sources, and the aggregation of it, and the finding the central themes and the things that you need to change and so forth is part of the obligation of the place where AI should go in. So lean, and it's just a way of thinking. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Too many people who don't know what the heck they're doing reduce it to a tool. Okay. The same thing can happen with AI. It's just a tool. No, it isn't a tool. It is something that's going to help us think, become better at what we do,
Yeah.
because it has the ability way beyond the individual at any moment in time to
Hmm.
capture massive amounts of information, analyze it, and get it to the place where it needs to happen based on the identification of something as simple as waste. So people who think that AI is just another computer program are doomed.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. The people who sell it, who don't go into the organization and help them understand the obligation that they have, not just for being clever, because clever may create isolated efficiency, not system
Yeah.
wide efficiency, but to help organizations understand how the thinking that you provide help strengthen the system. And then something else that's really valuable, because the conversation right now, as you well know, is that everybody's talking about AI eliminating people. Okay. I heard
Yes.
one of the think tank guys, describe it as, boy, we're getting better at efficiency and we're eliminating people. If
Hmm.
I'm in an organization and somebody said, hey, I've got this great tool and you may lose your job, how likely am I to support it, to improve it?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is true, which is that the strength of AI is not just being taking a set of information and feeding it forward in a way that people can understand, but
Hmm.
getting the feedback from it and
Yes.
understanding, did we hit the problem? Did we miss the problem? Are we creating isolated efficiency and not system wide efficiency? Are we looking at the system in a whole, which includes people, philosophy, policies, all those things? And are we looking at those things and putting AI in context? It was amazing to me in so many ways, because I worked in traditional American industry,
Hmm.
how important the concept of accountability is. And
Yeah.
we built them into our personnel policies. We built them into the way people interact with each other. We
Hmm.
built them into the accountability that is something as simple as a person showing up on time or being there every day. We built that accountability into it. In other words, if there was a problem, we were not going to rush in and solve that problem.
Yeah.
We took the person whose accountability was deficient and worked with them to understand why and how that happened, and then ultimately put the accountability back on them. What are you going to do about it? And just a couple of simple things. Our absenteeism tardiness was less than 1% for the year. The
Wow.
first year that when I was there, we measured it to see. The
Hmm.
turnover, it was less than 1%.
Oh.
So there's something in the formula that said that we may be the smartest people in the world and we may gather information till the cows come in. But the
Hmm.
fact of the matter is, there's somebody thinking about that ecosystem, all the nodes of that ecosystem that in my simple way, like to think about it as a tree. And the tree has roots and it has a trunk and it has branches and it has leaves. And if everything does really well, you may get some fruit from it.
Yeah.
And if we don't stop and think about all those things and we don't consider them, then we're more likely going to create something that either doesn't last or is isolated efficiency, which means one of the values in the system is the smooth flow of the product.
Hmm.
Right. We can tell the customer, you'll have your product in X number of hours from the time it enters the production line till the time it leaves. And we manage to that. So it's much more complex. And
Hmm.
quite honestly, the people in the company will never fully understand the complexity of AI. And the AI people will never be successful unless they interject into the ecosystem
Yeah.
and strengthen it. And as Toyota found out the hard way, strengthen it by lifting up people and not holding them down.
Yeah.
It's, and when I say thinking, then if I were selling I would say to people, I realize you can think, but I want you to understand the depth of the thinking that we went into to
Yeah,
come up with a solution so that you can have the information. And guess what? That's only the beginning. Once you get that information, what you do with it is critical, and the ability of that information to grow and develop, just like the process in the plant would grow and develop, becomes important to you and all the people that are thinking very deeply about it.
yeah, definitely, John. I think one of the things that you mentioned that at this point, people are more feared about the AI rather than being excited about it. So at this point of time, people do believe that their major power is just getting the answer. But I think the major power, as you mentioned, like AI is better at giving the feedback. For example, if we provide the SOPs of all the plants in it and say, improve this one. So definitely this, I deal with these kind of like clients daily on daily basis because I help them improve their positions in their current organization as well. So that's one of thing I completely agree, John. They needs to understand how AI can actually help them rather than just fearing about it. And the more we could create the awareness in the society, the more people will involved in AI rather than being excluded by AI. Definitely. And what do you think, John, from 3 to 5 years, where this industry is actually moving towards to?
Well, I would rather think it's longer than anybody thinks it is, because
Mhm.
that tells me that they're not looking at it as a short-term solution. So I hope it's longer. I hope it's longer because the thinking is going to be deeper and the actual solutions are going to be proven as they go. And that information gets fed back to you, and you're able to incorporate it into your thinking about the problem after having some experience. There's a problem that we have in the East, right? Or in the West, wherever the heck we are on this globe. We think everything has to happen in the next 30 seconds. Okay. In fact, one of the things I learned about the people in Toyota was that they think that time is unlimited. We've got all the time in the world to solve this problem.
Yeah.
Where in the United States is, we got to get this done in the next 30 days. And so it that's part of the issue. The other part of it that I think is even more importantly is the concept of wa. And
Mhm.
I don't know what that concept, it probably came from Hindu, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it basically said that if you have harmony, if you have all the pieces working together, and everybody has a central thought, whether it's a thought about God or a thought about how things work or a thought about, human dignity, it doesn't matter. If they have that and they get harmony from it, then
Mhm.
things flow a lot smoother. So
Yeah.
you've got two concepts: time is unlimited and harmony is key. And at Toyota, they had to learn that lesson the hard way, because at one point, everybody in the corporation walked out and they said, you're not treating us like we're part of the village. You're
Yeah.
treating us like we're, chattels. We're just modes of operation. You don't treating us like people. And so
Mhm.
if you think you can make cars without us, please try. And
Yeah.
Toyota went, oh my God. And that was a seminal moment in the corporation when they learned and understood how important those people are that add value,
Yeah.
that build the product. And that's why the philosophy, then naturally went back to some of the fundamentals. Was a Chinese concept. I'm sure it has an equivalent in India and that part of the East. But the fact of the matter is that it's a way of living. It's
Yeah.
a something very, very powerful. And the issue that I have is that there are people who want to put a label on everything. You are not AI. You
Yeah.
think about AI. You work with AI, but what you are is you're trying to create an organization that functions better.
Yeah.
And you know that it functions better when everybody is bought in and engaged in it. So all these concepts go together and they have to be thought about. Now, is AI a short-term thing? Absolutely not. The nice
Yeah.
thing about it is, and those people who know a lot more about it, they just see an ever expanding universe, right? And that's important that they see and continue to see that. But that connection of that very deep thinking back into things that are very simple and primary, that gap is bridged. And so all I hear right now is, we got to get AI. For what? What are you going to use it for? Well, I don't know, but everybody's doing it, so we need to do it.
Yeah.
Those people who win, in my opinion, are the people who bring solutions to organizations that actually make improvement, not just in the process, not just in productivity, not just in this and that, but in the whole ecostructure. Why?
Yeah.
Because we're thinking about it.
Yes, Alan, that's completely true. The thing that you mentioned, that people do comes to me as well, like business owners, like we want to improve, we want to implement AI. So I give them the first thought, like, do you actually need it? If you actually need it, then I can help you. If you don't need it, then we can't help you in this regard. So definitely, business owners at this point of time need to understand what's the impact of having the AI and not having the AI. So I weigh between the both and let them know like exactly what you need in your organization before jumping into the AI train. So let's talk about John now. Your tech solution developments. If you so let me ask this way. So what's the one thing that going perfectly well in your organization, and what is the one thing that if you had a magic wand you could explain and eliminate that thing? That what those two things would be?
Well, yeah, the first one is that philosophy of success. We're rooting for success and we're putting success in what we do and how we do it. And what that basically says is that every piece of the organization has its importance. And that we can't treat people like they're different just because they look a little differently or they conduct their lives a little differently outside the plant. Inside the plant, we've got to have this equality, not based on role, not based on salary or any of those. Those things really have to. But there's a certain equality which says to us that I'm a leader. I have two things that I have to do. My first is I have to satisfy the customer. Okay, that's primary. The
Yeah.
second thing I have to do is develop people. Okay, so whatever AI brings to me, I'm looking for something that's going to develop my people, and I'm
Mhm.
looking for it. The second thing is that the toughest piece of that is what was called a long time ago in a lot of psychological studies deconfirmation. They have to deconfirm where they are right now, and that is
Yeah.
really tough. But the only way they'll do it, right, is to see it and
Yeah.
to experience it. And so if I were thinking about trying to get into an organization, I would think about this process of deconfirmation. How are we going to do it? And I would think about our theme is success and people, and we want to lift up people. We want
Mhm.
people as a result of the work we have to have a better life at work. So now the other thing is that time becomes so important in that because again, people in the United States, North America, think they're really clever because they demand things to happen immediately, when in fact it's a huge weakness. And and so I have worked in Sri Lanka for about 5 years,
Mhm.
helping two garment companies. And I was always amazed at the extent to which they adapted the British and the American system just without ever thinking through it, just adapt it and go do it. And so the thing that has to happen is that if you're in a developing country, and Sri Lanka is that, they want to
Mhm.
be like the best in the world. They want to be
Yeah.
like that. But if you all you do is imitate it and don't put the thinking into it, then you're always going to sub-optimize what you're doing. And I
Mhm.
think the biggest optimization, and in working in Sri Lanka, was that they didn't want the people who make the product to think.
Mhm.
Right? That's a leader's job. That's what we're
Yeah.
supposed to do. So this deconfirmation process is just as bad in the U.S. again because you wouldn't hire somebody if they didn't come from some other successful company, and surely they'd bring to us what they had at the other companies and so forth. When in fact at Toyota, we were told pretty completely, I didn't hire you to do anything but teach other people how to think and to make progress as a result of good thinking, not dictating what has to happen. So I think
Yeah.
those kind of things become quite profound and quite important. And the work we've done is and the biggest problem we had is how do we unfold this for somebody
Mhm.
so that they can see and understand the values and principles that underlie it, not just the surface stuff, what's actually happening. What are the metrics? What are the measurements? Can't tell you how many times people said, what are the metrics Toyota use? And I tell them the same thing. I can tell you exactly what they are and I can tell you how to calculate them, and it won't make you one bit better.
Yeah. Culture change is important.
Yeah.
And like in the, that's what you're saying, that the culture change is one, like the pain point for you in order to, for your client to tell them. This is what
Yes.
you're currently facing as a problem, right?
Yes. And here's a fundamental understanding. The Toyota production system is the culture in the plant. And what we have done is brought people from various cultures into the plant, help them transition to this new culture. And the most important piece of that is mutual trust and respect,
Yeah.
listening before talking, making sure that people understand that we understand how important they are. There's just a lot of stuff that goes into mutual trust and respect, and create this environment where people believe that they're going to be better as a result of being treated differently, because you don't have to tell people we're going to teach you how to think. That would blow their mind. No, no, no. I learned that on the farm. What we're going to do is we're going to create an environment where you can think, give you the tools to be able to do that, and listen to you, because you are the owner of your process and have the best opportunity to see when there's a deviation in it.
So, how big is your total system development companies? How many employees are there?
Well, here's the point. We had a 5-year contract with the Air Force when COVID hit.
Okay.
Okay. And the Air Force wouldn't even let us on the bases to do our work.
Okay.
So in our network, there's probably 20 or 30 people that they don't work for us now because people thought they were really clever. Let's go out and hire people and bring them into the company, and they can do lean, when in
Okay.
fact they don't know what they're doing. Okay, so in answer to your question, there's myself and my son and 2 other people that work for us regularly.
Okay.
As a result of being in HR at Toyota, I have an almost endless network of people
Yeah.
that would love to tell other people, how to do what Toyota does.
So,
So,
how do you currently get your clients? Like, what are your current clients?
well, the current clients, we've made a shift, okay? Out of necessity, that's one thing. But basically, what we're doing is we're working with the school system in our county and
Okay.
industry and the funding mechanism of the state and we're putting together a consortium where
Okay.
we all get together and talk about how we can help each other out. And the interesting thing about the consortium is that every company believes they do it well. So in order to get the consortium to work well, we have to teach them the Toyota production system. And so we're working in the county we're in. There are 2 or 3 other counties that we're working with in the very early stages. And what they all really want is they know that there's a trend taking place in the U.S. that they have to pay attention to.
Mhm.
The particular county I'm in is known for educational excellence. 86% of their kids go to college and are successful. What do you do about the other 14%?
Yeah.
And so they have a new superintendent, and who's basically saying, we have to create something for those people to have a successful life after school.
Mhm.
Now, the other irony is that the schools are so expensive and the
Yeah.
return on investment is so uncertain
Yeah.
that a lot of kids who would normally immediately go off to college are asking the question, why should I pay $20,000 a year without any guarantee that I'm going to get anything out of it? And
Yeah.
so and the demographics in the US are changing. People are
Mhm.
having fewer kids. Those resources that companies rely on are going to get the pool is going to get smaller and smaller. So the connection we made is that the kids learn how to operate in an organizational climate that's a thinking climate, that we're teaching the industry at the same time we're teaching the school system. And the state has recognized that it's all about community development, what we're trying to do. So, we're taking steps, we're getting there. We've had some really great breakthroughs in it. And that's where my son and I are spending most of our time right now.
Okay.
I did some consulting with the Atomic Energy Commission out in Idaho. They wanted to understand what's lean and how do they do it and so forth. So there are opportunities out there for
Mhm.
us. But
Yeah.
for us, this work that we're doing right now is something that's very meaningful to us. We'd like to get back into industry. We would. But this
That's nice.
kind of work is full of purpose for us.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good job that John, you guys are doing right now. So
Yeah.
if we talk about total system development, where do you see this? Where do you want to take this company from 6 to 12 months right now? What's your goal for that?
Yeah, so our goals are, in the short term, we have to create a success in the school consortium.
Mhm.
Okay, that's our short-term goals. we're
Oh,
preparing all the training and all the connections it made, and we're exploring various sources of technical knowledge that can be brought to the kids. So that's our short-term goal, probably over the next year, to make sure that we have a success. Kentucky has 120 counties. There's only one of those counties that has a consortium
wow.
that is focused like we are. So it's a huge business opportunity for us. But right now we're doing it for nothing. We're doing it because we believe in it. And and I did well enough in my consulting business that the marginal utility of the next dollar is pretty damn low. It better have purpose associated with it. But as time goes and we have the opportunity to build that and build, back again. When we were with Ford, we had 30 some people at Ford doing work. So we know we know what large contracts are right. We had, I don't know how many people in the Air Force doing work. And so again, we're really focused on getting the reliability and predictability at the county level for kids so they have a clear path of where they're going.
That's
Toyota actually, when they select the kids to enter the program, actually give them a job offer. And if they successfully complete it, they're going to have a job at Toyota. So that's the kind of commitment to these kids we'd like to make. And of course, what follows that is that they have to have the right training, they have to have the right information. They have to considering education as an entertainment process and and not something that's going to build their future. We have to show them the value of that, how they can grow and develop and so forth in organizations. So it's quite expansive for us, but so far so good.
That's very philanthropic work, John, and you and your team, and especially your son, is doing. So definitely, this is gonna help the Kentucky at a lot. So thanks, John, for being on the podcast today. I learned a lot from you, being like getting the things done before getting into the AI. Let's understand the AI before, and changing the culture and keeping the harmony in the company. And you have a lot of things to teach me. I think
Yeah.
definitely it's gonna be benefit from it. Thank you, John, for being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad to meet you this way, and I hope at any time if you need me to help you in any way, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, John.